This chart, every time you go anywhere near LinkedIn or people writing about blockchain, they're all writing about DeFi, decentralized finance. And when I think about decentralized finance, I almost see two kind of scenarios for decentralized finance for DeFi. The first one is where you might call this the search for yield, where effectively everybody's just looking for a new way to make a fast buck, and how you can use these new decentralized marketplaces to bring buyers and sellers together. But the second use case, we're not yet seeing it, but I think it's coming, is where you link this DeFi world to the real world, and you start changing the dynamics of that liquidity that we were talking about just now through the real supply chain, the physical supply chain. And you also potentially start to disrupt the banks, because this supply chain has to be financed. Ultimately, it's not until the guy at the end, which might be you and me in the supermarket, in this scenario, buy our carton of orange juice, that value then has to flow all the way back to the farmer. And we effectively have to finance that supply chain, so somebody has to provide the capital, whether it's the shareholder by way of accumulated reserves, or increasingly the bank by way of finance. And what DeFi could do is it could start to disintermediate the banks, right, in that role as lender. And you might see communities coming together on the top right, where you've got lots of small investors coming together, and we're using these decentralized autonomous organizations, these DAOs, to bring all of these small investors together and to create some form of digital liquidity, some kind of financing, which is effectively going to drive this supply chain. And we'd be looking for the DeFi marketplace to then bring these buyers and sellers together to create that credit and then automate these transactions. And if we're doing this in a digital way, then suddenly you can maybe support microtransactions, you can support clear and settle at the same time. And you suddenly start thinking, and you can automate the payment, obviously, through a smart contract. You suddenly start thinking, holy smokes, wow, what a transformation I could do to that supply chain. If I told you today, 30 to 40% of effort in that supply chain, from the farmer through to the retailer, is done simply trying to reconcile information before payments can be made. If you could automate all of that, and provide visibility, the transformation that could be made in supply chains is just unbelievably big. So I think when we think about DeFi, it's maybe helpful to start thinking about linking the physical and the digital. And I think it's maybe quite helpful to think of the challenges that may be brought on the banks if they choose not to innovate and they choose not to play in this marketplace. And I think it's a mistake just to chase yield. I think you have to add value, and I think you add value by transforming supply chains. So